Going to go ahead and welcome everybody to, I think this is the first on-campus virtual coffee that we've had in 2 years, right? So we're so excited. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to introduce this wonderful group of professionals that have put the coffee hour together for you. First I'll introduce Maka, in no order, just she's next to me. Maka is our literacy coach here at school, and she works closely with the teachers on a daily basis in planning literacy and coaching them, teaching alongside them. So her work is more with teachers, but of course she also impacts students greatly. Then we have Gre. And Gre is part of our learning lab and especially focused on ELL or EAL, so English as an additional language for our students that are not English speakers. And she also plans with teachers weekly on what they're going to be doing in literacy, and she works with the teachers on co-teaching with teachers, which has different ways of co-teaching, teaching alongside them, planning with them, working in small groups, pulling students out, and pushing into the classroom. So thank you, Gre. And Ms. Maka Arce, Maka Montero, so we say Maka M, Maka A, and not to get confused. Maka is also part of Gre's team, the ELA team, working with our non-native English speakers, and also they kind of divide and conquer the whole school since we have so many in elementary that are non-native English speakers. And so they both work very similarly with different teachers and different students daily in the school. And then, of course, last but not least, we have Mariel Chamas, who is our literacy consultant. She's not actually a staff member, but it pretty much seems like she is because she's here every day, all day, I think. She goes above than what actually her job description is, probably. And she gives teachers professional development and really is available 24/7 for any type of assistance when it comes to literacy. So I'm going to leave you in great hands. I'm going to be in the back helping with the filming, and I'll send it to parents that weren't able to come. So let's give them a nice round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming. So today we're going to be giving you some tips and strategies you can use at home for reading, and they're super easy to do. So thanks for coming. So the basics, it's really important that you read at home. It doesn't necessarily have to be in English. It can be in any language, in your mother tongue. And then fill your home with books. Let's give your kids easy access to books. Make sure that you have books that are of interest to your kids. So for example, if they like horses, make sure you have lots of books about horses. If they like mystery books, make sure you have lots of books that your kids are interested in. Our goal is always to read for pleasure, right? Reading should be a fun activity that you do at home, so it's really important that you never force your kids to read, because I know that after school they have after-school activities or sometimes birthday parties, and sometimes they get home and it's late. Don't force them to read, because it's going to create a negative association to reading. And saying never use reading as a punishment, like, oh, you're going to go read for 10 minutes if you don't do this and that, because it creates a negative association to reading, and that's not what we want. We want to teach kids that reading is fun, that it's a fun activity, and it's also a great time to spend time with your family, right? If you're doing read out louds, maybe before bedtime or when they come home from school, it's a great time to spend a great way to spend time with your family. And as I said, the goal is always to teach kids and show them that reading can be fun and that we read for pleasure. It's not homework, it's not something that we have to do. When you read with your child, it's really important that you give them time to correct their mistakes. So oftentimes they'll be making mistakes when they read. Don't correct them right away. Don't jump in and say, like, that's his dog. Like, just give them time, and you can prompt them and say, let's reread that word. Let's look at the letters. What sounds do they make? Or let's look at the picture. Does this word make sense? So give them time to correct their mistakes, because that way we're working on their self-correction skills, and that's something we really, really work on here, because when they're reading independently, we want to make sure that they are correcting their mistakes, that they catch their own mistakes. And then also, when you read aloud to your child, have conversations about the book. You can ask them questions like, how did this part make me feel? Or you can say, oh, this reminded me of the time we did this and that. Have conversation with your children when you read. And also when you read out loud, another strategy you can do is take turns. Maybe you read one page and then your kid reads another page. That's something you can do at home when you're reading out loud with your kids. Something very important when we read is to make connections to the books you're reading. So connect what you're reading or what your kid is reading to the experiences they've already had. So for example, like, oh, this book reminded me of the time we traveled to so-and-so, or we read a book similar to this, or do you remember when this happened? So make connections to the books you read, and like I said, it lends itself for great conversations to get to know your kids, spend time with your kids. And then also really, really important to ask questions as you read. Slides 6 through 8, we're going to share this presentation with you. Slides 6 through 8 have more detailed information about what you can do before you read, when you read, and after you read. But basically, we want to make sure that the kids are understanding what they're reading, because sometimes you'll see that maybe your kid can read a story, but then you ask them about it and they have no idea what they read. So we want to make sure that they are understanding what they're reading, so you can ask comprehension questions, like basic questions of what was the problem in the story, what was the solution, who was the character, what happened. And you can also ask your kid to retell the story from beginning to end, like tell me what happened in order. That's also going to show us if they're understanding what they're reading. And then you can also ask those open-ended questions. Some examples of open-ended questions are, these are questions that don't have a right or wrong answer. So questions like, what was your favorite part, or why do you think the character did this, or what would you do if you were in the character's shoes? So that's something really, really important. And you don't necessarily have to ask those questions at the end. It can be as you're reading the story. So as you're reading the story, you can pause and ask your child to predict, like, what do you think is going to happen? And if they say something, have them have evidence. Like, why do you say that? Let's have them look for clues, or what do you think is going to happen? Why do you think that's going to happen? So that way we're making sure that the kids are understanding not only what they are reading, but what you are reading with them as well. And something very, very important that we want all parents to keep in mind, as you know, here in ACS we have reading levels that show us if your kid is reading at grade level, maybe they're above grade level or not there yet. But we want to emphasize that you don't define your child by a reading level, right? Your kid is not a B reader, he's not a G reader. We want to make sure that the kids are, we want to make sure that we don't label the kids as you are this level reader, because that's not what's important. As I said, what's important is that the kids are enjoying to read, that they can connect to the stories, that they relate to the stories. So yes, it is important to know your child's level to see how they are performing, if they're performing at grade level or if they maybe need a little help, but that's not the main thing. That's not what we want. So, as I said, it's important that they enjoy reading, that they understand what they read, and that they can relate to the stories they're reading. So, don't rush through the levels, right? On RAS Kids or through the books in the bag, don't rush through the level and be like, we have to move up levels, or quickly let's move on to the next level on RAS Kids, because that's not what we want, right? We want kids to enjoy what they're reading. And as I said, if we're defining kids as readers, we want to define your kid as, oh, my child is a reader who likes to read about nonfiction books, or my child is a reader who likes to learn about dinosaurs, or my child is a reader who likes mystery books. So don't define your child by a reading level, because that's not what is important. And I want to remind you that sometimes, for example, if your kid is in 3rd grade and your kid can read at a level Z, for example, it's great, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the level your kid should be reading, because first of all, the topics are not going to be pertinent to your child's age. They won't relate to the story. So just because your child can read at a higher level, it doesn't mean that that's the level they should be reading. We want to make sure that it's great that they can read maybe above grade level, but we want to make sure that the stories they're reading are something that they relate to and are pertinent to their own experiences. And then
and also, can I interrupt and just say also, and age appropriate.
Yeah.
Like, you know, a lot of time the higher level books will talk about topics that maybe you don't want your child to be exposed to just yet at their age. So especially for the higher level readers, it's really important that parents are really looking at what books and the topics they're reading about.
Yes. And then I just want to remind you that we have so many resources available for you guys. In the library, you can check out books. Each year we get new books, so make sure you take advantage of that. Your kids also go home with their books in a bag. You've probably seen them take home their books in a bag. You can also use those books to read with your kids, and especially for the little ones, it's okay if they want to reread the same book over and over again. That's totally okay. And then you've probably seen Raz Kids at home. We emphasize the use of Raz Kids a lot because it has lots of great features. The kids can listen to the book being read to them, and I love that because especially when the kids are tired, they don't want to read after school, or they get home and they're tired, have your kid listen to it. It's also a great resource because that's where they can practice fluency, they can build their vocabulary, they can hear what the story sounds like. So use that feature, and then there's also the feature where the kids read it, and there's the feature that the kids can record themselves reading the story, and the kids love it, and I'm going to show you where that is if you want to do that at home. And at the end, they always have questions, which we love to use because they're short, they're quick, and that's where you can see if your kids are understanding the story, because it has not only basic comprehension questions, but also open-ended questions as well. So I'm going to show you on Raz Kids. So on Raz Kids, you're going to see these features. The headphone set, that's the one that reads the story to your kids. The book is the one where the kids read it. And this, after they read the story, the question icon will pop up, and that's where they get to answer the question. And Ms. Mecca, can you click on the book? Yeah. If you click on read. No, I think you have to go. The next. This is the read. Yeah, I want to show them where the to record themselves. No, go back. Go back. I think just click on the book. And then.
Yeah, they need to do the reading.
So they first need to listen to it, read it, and then on the next time you'll see an icon that looks like a microphone, and it'll tell you like 1, 2, 3, go, and that's where the kids can record themselves, and it's great. We use it here sometimes in school, and the kids love it because then they get to hear themselves read. So you can make Raz Kids so fun with your kids, and like I said, don't push your kids to read. What's important is that they read, if they can, every day, and you don't have to be like, you have to read for 30 minutes. If one day they want to read 10 minutes, that's totally okay. And now, Ms. Chapman is going to
There's a question?
Yes, question?
About the recording,
Yes.
is there any way that the application or the software can assess the level of reading, or is just for
No, yeah, it can assess the level of reading, but they can hear, after they finish recording, you can hear it, the kids can hear it, and it gets saved on their Raz Kids profile.
And sometimes the teachers do
Yeah.
use it to do a quick assessment of where they are. So if it is recorded, the teachers often use it.
Yeah.
I have one more question. How does it apply for the kids, KG3 kids, right?
So, well, for KG3 kids right now, for example, they're not reading, but the great feature you can use is to listen to it, and then you can also maybe read the story to your kid, and then maybe you can ask the questions at the end. But for the little ones, they really like to listen to stories being read to them.
With importance to reading, is it really important to make your child read something every day? Because like we read every day, but it's mostly me reading the story. And sometimes like she'll read a few things.
I would say a mixture of both, because when you read the story to your kids, you're also modeling fluency, which, for example, your kid is in first grade, which is moving on to second grade. We work a lot on fluency, so you're modeling like what the story should sound like, but it's also important that they get time to practice reading as well. So I would do a mixture.
All right, but
of
like
both.
if she's like, she doesn't want to.
Yeah, then if she doesn't want to, for sure, you can read it, and that also works.
Ms. Maka, what's fluency?
So fluency is where we teach them to read not like a robot, because at the beginning you're going to see if your kids are small that they read like word by word, and it's not fluid. It sounds like a robot. So we tell them that fluency is when you read like you speak, right? So it's fluid, and for example, if you see a question mark, you change your voice. If you see an exclamation, you change your voice. If you see the quotation marks, you might change your voice. So when we say fluency, is that we're teaching them to read fluidly, like how we speak. So if you read with your child, you're also modeling fluency as well, because you were probably also going to change your voice, make different voices for characters. So if your child that does not want to read, definitely you read, and that's also great as well. Any other questions? Great. So now Ms. Chamas is going to show you the different types of books your kids might be bringing home.
Okay, so I've set up Parmesan, and she came in and she was like, who touched all my books? And I was like, me, I moved everything. But I wanted to show you the different kinds of books that the kids might be reading at different levels. So for our youngest kids, our preschoolers and into kindergarten, sometimes even into first grades, the books that we begin with are emergent story books, these type of books. So you might be getting these home in the book bags that you have. So this kind of book is where they start, as opposed to a level A book. A level A book, I'm going to show you the difference. This one, Play Kitty, has very few words, right? And what this is teaching, right, let me show you. My kitty likes to play. Swing, run, kitty. We don't start preschoolers on this, because this is when they start decoding or really working on breaking apart the word. We actually start our kids reading this kind of book, right? The Three Billy Goats Graph. This is a good one. And the reason we start them here is because they're not actually reading the words. That's not our focus with the early readers. Our focus with the early readers is that they get a sense of characters, a sense of setting, a sense of the story, and that they fall in love with it, right? This is better than Netflix. So you're reading it. You're reading it to them, and they're rereading it to you. And you'll notice, because the teacher reads it to them at school multiple times, many times. That means that now they open the book, and they're kind of just making it up as they go. That's okay. That's what they need to be doing at that age, okay? And they are really reading, right? Because they're looking at a book and they're telling a story. They're not reading the words, but they're really reading a book. They're getting a message from a book. And we've got multiple emergent storybooks, and these are super valuable, and it's not a one and done deal. You gotta read this and read these again and read them again, just like you've seen Cars 3,000 times and watched Frozen 3,000 times. You're going to read these books multiple times, right? And they're going to fall in love with characters, know them well, make voices, and you need to get into it too. Then we can talk about our leveled books. I pulled out a few examples of those. The leveled books push our kids to really decode. That's when they're starting to really look at words, to really understand, oh, the M goes, so when I see this here, that says man, right? Or we can stop them and they say, oh, I see the chicken. And you're like, oh, it can't be chicken, right? Because there's an H there. So it's, I see the hen. That's what the work you're starting to do on level books. Again, what Maka said. Yes, the levels guide us, and they guide us as teachers to know exactly where your kid is and to know where to push them and where they feel really comfortable and where they're frustrated. But don't define your kid as a level. And lots of our kids do that. Like you ask them what kind of reader you are, and they're like, I'm a J-level reader. And you're like, no, you're not. You're not a J-level reader, right? You're a reader that loves to read about funny books. You're a reader that likes nonfiction. You're a reader, so watch out, right? Because the levels are a slippery slope, and we don't want to define our kids in that way. Lately, the big push is for phonics readers, which are a little bit different than leveled, and these are more about phonics skills. So sometimes the stories are a little bit funny because it's like Frog on a Log and the dog. So these phonics books, they help teach the phonics skills. So the sound skills that they've been learning are really practiced on phonics readers. So these are an assortment of books that might be coming home to you in the book baggies. And you might have, I'm sure you're going to have questions, but they're used for different purposes. Also, feel free to reach out to me. Miss Inara can give you my email, and if you have questions, I'm happy to talk about those. Now, I want to talk to you about hooking our readers, right? How do you get them to fall in love with reading? And we're so lucky because look around at this library, right? It's amazing. Come to the library and check out books for your kids. I check out way too many, ask me. Fill your house with books if you can, and just display them. Have them in the car, have them in the bathroom, right? Have them everywhere. Every chance that they get, open up a book and read. It's important. Now, one way to hook readers is books that have come in series. And what I mean by that is books about one character. So we've got like 10 different issues of the Fly Guy book. If your child falls in love with Fly Guy, well, guess what? I've got another Fly Guy book waiting for you, right? So series are really good, and we have so many series, right? The Frog and Toad, The Fox and Friends. Everybody loves Junie B. Jones. She's super funny. We've got so many. We've got so many. So books and series are a really good way to hook readers. Another thing is, I want you to help your kids know what kind of reader they are, right? So instead of saying, I'm a C-level reader, I want them to say, I'm a kid that likes comic books. I'm a kid that likes books about sharks and true things, right? Or we've got the horrible histories, right? These are horrible. And the kids love all the gore in them, and we have these, and we have the I Survives and the amulets. We've got, so if your kid's a nonfiction reader, we've got biographies. Come to our library, right? Like now.
So can I say something about
Yes.
that? Yes, I know the library has been closed and we've only been doing the virtual checkout.
Mm-hmm.
But beginning fourth quarter, in just a few weeks, we're going to open up the library one day a week for parents to come after school to check out books. Okay, so that's going to be exciting.
But come.
Yes, if no one comes, we're going to close it back down.
But the virtual still.
The virtual's still working, yes, for sure.
So how long, am I done? Do I have any time? So at the end, I'm going to invite you to come and look at the different kinds of books and ask me questions so I can help you find the just right books for your kids, okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, did someone want to ask before? No? Okay, first, like, how do I know what my child's level is? I know I'm not going to define her by that, but like, how do I know? And second, when I do the virtual checkout process, I don't know how to look for like age adequate books. I kind of like, I'm like, okay, how to deal with sharing. So I like Google books that are good for sharing, but I don't know how to use the library.
I can show you, we can show you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
the
in
level?
terms of the level, you
Okay.
should definitely be able to ask the teacher,
Okay.
and they'll tell you what level your child is. And it is a good guide, just so that if you want them to be like working on their decoding skills, you don't want them to be reading at a level that's frustrational for them, right? And when they read with you, they can read at a level that's a little bit above their level. Like they're a C-level reader with you, with your support, they can be reading at a D level, right? So you pull them up. When they read with you, you pull them up a little bit, and that's great.
Yeah, and also the books in the bag that go home. For example, if they said 5 books home, usually the lowest level. So for example, if you have in the books in the bag, you see C, D, and maybe a G. Their level, their independent level is going to be the C level, the lowest level, and then the D is the level that they can read with your support. And then there's usually always 1 or 2 books at a different level, and that's the book that they choose that they love. It doesn't necessarily have to be the book they love. I mean, a book they can read, but the books in the bag are usually at their level.
It's a little lowest.
The lowest, that's their level, and then the level above, that's the level that they can read with your support.
Yes, Meg?
With the virtual checkout, what I started doing the last 3 months is just on the first line, saying, just send me your favorite books for first graders. And Ms. Ame has been every month just giving me like 10 different books that have been great without me going into the card catalog.
Oh,
or the,
great, yeah.
That's great.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
She's awesome like that. That's what she does. When they come to library time, you know, when they have a little lesson at the beginning, and then half the period is a lesson, and then half the period is for them to roam and just fall in love with all our books. And so she goes up, what are you looking for? She guides them, I'm looking for, whatever, a funny book, and she'll take, and, she knows, of course, everything by memory, so she'll guide them to the right spot, and they're just there, and they're eating it up. They're looking at everything, to decide which books they want to check out. So also really important to return your books every time they have library time so they can check out some more, because, we don't let them check out unless they've returned. So, so she's an expert. So when you do start coming in, she'll become your best buddy, and then she'll help guide you, and then you can memorize the library as well.
I think it's also important to clarify that we have different kinds of, like, we've got this library, and at this library, we're less rigid, I guess, we're not rigid anywhere, but we're less rigid about, they pick any book, right? So in the library, they can, maybe, your kid that doesn't know how to read will come back with a big fat Harry Potter book. It's okay, right? Like, just breathe, it's okay. Like, they pick any book that they want. from the classroom libraries, which we're so lucky to have libraries within every classroom, it'll be closer more to their level. You'll have at least 3 probably that are at their level, right? So we've got both of those resources happening for you. I've put together 3 quick slides. Can we just zoom past them? The first one is about reading with our youngest, ways to build comprehension, and the last one is about reading more complex texts for our older students. But I think I'm going to just zoom because I'm going to go over otherwise. We'll be sharing this with you, but I will ask that you go back and read these because these are tips for how to read with your younger and older child. But for the sake of time, I'm going to hand this over to our wonderful ELL
However, with
teachers.
time, Miss Maria,
We're good.
it's 9.
We're perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you, and good morning again, everyone. My name is Miss Gray, like Miss Maria was introducing myself, and then my colleague Maca A. So we're gonna add a little bit of strategies on how you can support listening and speaking at home. So I'm gonna be talking about English, and then Miss Maca is going to share something about how you can stimulate your child's language through your mother tongue. So, but a forward, before all this, like listening, and just like the girl said it for reading, like if you want to encourage listening and speaking at home, make it fun. It has to be fun. Yeah, it doesn't have to look like homework or like work or like, no, it has to be fun. Maybe you can have rewards, right? And again, we want to stimulate language. So we can avoid correcting unless it's something really important. But, at home, our children are relaxed, are with you, are in their, the area they feel most comfortable in. So just avoid correcting. Like if you want to encourage language, listening or speaking, just avoid correcting. Focus on having them use the language. And then, just like the girl said it for reading, avoid forcing practice. Like we have to practice. Like even when we present it like that, then it's something that is kind of, we don't feel like so open to. So keeping this in mind, I'm going to be sharing some ways, some games, speaking games. Let's move on to the next one. That you can use at home. Okay, and some of these I do myself. My husband has a 14-year-old, and he's learning English. Okay, so we're starting to do some routines in English when we're all together at home. No? Like let's say it's breakfast time, so we're all, it's gonna be English breakfast, so we're doing it all in English. Even if he doesn't have still the proficiency to follow along a long conversation, he is a beginner. But have him listen, have him being exposed to English, in this case at home, helps a lot. It's one way to begin. So maybe for you, if everyone in the family speaks English, or at least the parents, the 2 adults, then maybe you can have cooking spoken in English, or you can play it with them in English, or you can have lunch or dinner or anything in English. Another way to practice listening and speaking in English at home is, and forever favorite, watching TV, watching videos in English. Some people have kids watch a movie in Spanish, and maybe they already watched it in Spanish, but then they rewatch it in English. Or maybe you have them watch it in Spanish, and then the subtitles are in English, or the other way around, or both, right? Both are in English, the movie, the audio, and the captions too. So that's one favorite. Listening to music. Raise your hand if you like music.
Yeah.
Everyone does, right? So, and of course we like Latin American and all sorts of music, but include listening to music in English. And if you already are a fan of different, genres in English, go ahead, play it in the background when you're together in the living room or on the car. So have these times. Karaoke, sing, have them sing also. Have them share the songs that they like, right, with you. So using music is really very positive, especially if you have a shy learner, a shy speaker, might know English but is shy sometimes. Music kind of solves that, because it kind of awakens some other areas in our lives that we kind of feel like we have to express ourselves, so we just go for it, right? So music. Then another idea is to have an English talking time where you talk about your day or what are your favorite things or things you didn't like. And then this is an idea I particularly like. It's like when you have some English challenges, like maybe you set up that, I don't know, Thursday night is English night. And again, it depends on your family, depends on your interests. Like if you have your children that are learning English, then you will be exposing them to listen to English that time. But let's say you're a family that already speaks English, all of you. If this is something that you would like to do, you can do it. It's just like for promoting fluency in speaking as well, you know, and confidence and all those different skills that come with, you know, being able to express and all that. So you could have an English night or an English Saturday. There's so many families where there are different languages, and then one side of like one language is spoken some days a week, and the other parent language is spoken another time. So that's something that can work out. Or even if you set it like for an hour or for 30 minutes or so. Let's move on. And then these are some ideas on games that you can play with young children. And Justin, I want to know, raise your hand if you have a young child. Young child, most of us. So some speaking games you can play, classic, I Spy. You know? So you can even play it, even if your own English is not that advanced, you can play it, right? Because these are kind of very repetitive games, like I spy, I don't know, green object, and then they will have to go for it, look for it. They don't really have to speak back to you, right? Simon Says, classic. Raise your hand if you know how to play Simon Says. Okay, so there you go. Again, it's listening. They're listening, and maybe they're repeating after you. And if you want them to repeat, then that's also another oral practice. Saying the opposite, like if I say, this would be like, if I say big, you say short. Or if I say tall, small. And if I say tall, you say short. If I say, I don't know, black, white, and so on. So this is a speaking game, really useful for young children. You can play it also with older children, maybe more complex adjectives. Then Pictionary, you can play Pictionary. It's really useful, helpful to like connect the visual with the word. Hide and seek flipped, I like that one. Because it was like you can play hide and seek with your child, but instead of just finding them, you can ask. You know? So where is Lily? And then they should answer. So that you can flip it that way. Or you can hide things around the house. And then where is this thing? Where is that object? So that's another listening. And then other ones, classic ones, as mimes, charades, ask the child, what am I doing? Sleeping, you know? Or whatever activity. Memory games, crafts, you can do crafts, handicrafts, and say the materials in English or instructions in English. And it's fun, so it's not like they have to repeat like you force them. It's natural, learning will be happening naturally. And then with older children, yeah, you can play board games, you could do tongue twisters and challenge them to say these, or even play with riddles. Thank you so much. I'm gonna hand it on to Ms. Maca.
Okay, this is Ms. Maca A. I would like to introduce translanguaging because I think our school community naturally does this. Most of us our home language is Spanish. And we also have multilinguals who speak, I don't know, Swedish, we have many French, we have Chinese and Korean. So I think this concept is very valuable. We do this normally in 4 or 3 different ways. Maybe, in some cases, English prevails in school and Spanish prevails at home, which is great, which is fine. As long as in our home language, we are also putting a little bit of literacy. Like if we are good, if we are literate in our own home language, that means that it helps us so much in the second language. So I think we really have to be conscientious about the language we have at home. Another thing is that, I think Ray mentioned this, maybe we can have a setting. Maybe we can say, okay, breakfast is in English today, or French, or whatever language. These are just examples of English and Spanish. Or maybe mom speaks French and dad speaks Korean, and we have this very, very valuable kid here speaking English, but we don't leave aside our home language. It is super important to keep it. And this is worldwide being a trend, and it is fine to do that. I think Maka mentioned this at the beginning, that as long as kids are enjoying reading the language at home, really, really does not have to be English, right? I know most of you, if not all of you, do a lot of English at home. You have English books all over the place. But the Spanish ones, the vocabulary we learn in our own language is super valuable, right? Okay, so this is what I was mentioning. The strong language model helps a lot in our first language to learn our second language. And the skills of practicing, like rereading a story as many times as the kids want because they love it, is great. It's not only books, but they can read passages, they can read poetry, they can read articles in the newspaper, current events in the world, age appropriate. All those things are literacy. They can talk about their chosen book, why they like it so much, right? And one thing that I really love about our kids is when they are able to draw their understanding. There's no writing involved, right? You can just read in whatever language, and what they're understanding, if they can illustrate a summary, the main idea, what is it that you love about this character, if they can draw the character, paint it all over, it's been like a very valuable strategy for them to explain what they can't write, right, yet. Playing charades, as Ms. Gray has mentioned, is really cool. It's fun. I do that in the classroom with some new vocabulary words that pop up, and I think that can be done at home for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? And this is just a quote. Concepts are transferable between languages. Many root words are the same in so many languages. In Spanish, we adopt a whole bunch of English words. English words use Latin root words, so they are transferable. And sometimes it is a very good thing that you just say, oh, it's the same in Spanish, it's the same in French, or in English, right? So one last tip to wrap it up is this really nice quote with the Bell Foundation. I have a whole bunch of resources that I have been reading lately. And it's the ability of your child to use a second language will depend on your ability to naturally discuss topics in your home language. So translanguaging is great, right? We don't need to teach grammar at home. We don't need to teach what is taught in school at home. We just need our kids to be happy in whatever language they speak at home. It is great to learn at school. Okay.
If I can piggyback on you for a minute, Ms. Maka. So one thing that we always tell parents is the reason we're asking you to focus on your home language or your what you speak, your mother tongue at home, is because the stronger, research has shown, the stronger a student's mother tongue, the easier it is to learn another language. Because we need something, the brain needs something to anchor to in order to understand new vocabulary. So if they're trying to understand I can't even think of a complex word. Let's say if they're trying to understand
Freedom, Maria, freedom.
Freedom, yes. But if they already know about freedom in their mother tongue, that you've already talked about it, then they're like, oh, yes. And that's why at school also, Spanish teachers plan with your child's classroom teacher. And a lot of time they mimic the same units in Spanish so that anchoring happens. And the Spanish teacher will say, you know how you're writing persuasive letters in class? Guess what? We're going to be writing persuasive letters also. So that translanguaging is happening also during the school day for those that native language is Spanish. So the more you can read in your native language, the more you can speak in your native language to your children, have deep conversations with them in their native language, the easier it will be to learn. And studies have shown, my master's research thesis was on just that, learning second languages and how the brain works. Students can learn up to 7 languages at a time, as long as they can focus, they know what adult to speak to in what language. So one thing to be aware of is try to avoid the half the sentence in English, half the sentence in Spanish. It's okay if a whole conversation is in Spanish and then another conversation in English, another in French, another in Swedish, another in Chinese. But don't mix in the middle of an idea. That's hard to do. That's hard to comprehend for a young brain, right? And they even suggest that's one adult per language. Like I look at you, I know it's always English. I look at you and I know it's always French. I look at you and I know that it's always Russian, right? The brain can do that. So 7 languages, let's go for it.
Yeah, I have a question related to that. What is the recommended age for a kid to start learning an additional language, like apart from Spanish and English and a third language? And what's the recommended age for them to start?
I mean, I'll say, but yeah, there's no recommended. As early as you want, they can start being exposed to additional languages.
Yeah, and also like by puberty, like when your child becomes a teen, then it says that the neuroplasticity of the brain starts declining a little. So like all before that,
Yeah.
it's perfect time.
Before
to
that,
learn.
it's
earlier.
a natural approach.
Under 12,
Yeah.
right, is the best time to learn as many languages as possible.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, 12 and above are, the pathways start to harden a little bit. They're not as flexible to learn more languages. And one thing that also they say is after 12, accents are really hard to lose. That's why so many adults that learn languages still have accents. But the younger a child learns a language, usually they don't have an accent in that language.
But one strength that we do have after that age is that we have our stronger will.
Exactly.
So like 20 years ago was the best time for me to learn the language, but if I really have the strength and will now to learn it and motivation, I will.
And that your native language after 12 already is very solidified. So that is something going for, they learn it faster because all those anchors are already made, right? So.
Maria, I have a question. My kids were not supposed to be in this school at the beginning, so.
Yes, I know.
So I started speaking to them in English, only English, until they came into the school. So once they started ACS, I switched to Spanish.
Perfect.
But is it okay if, like, once in a while, like, okay, not using Spanglish, but I've like switched to English, like?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
The thing that you really want to avoid is that Spanglish, right? Or that Portuñol, right? That people that speak Portuguese and Spanish do. You don't want, you want to try not to do that. Speak clean, right, and proper each language. Like a whole conversation, try to have in one language, and then a conversation in another language. Try not to switch.
I'm going to jump into, and I know we've said it, but I just want to emphasize it, right? We want our kids to learn English. We want our kids to learn a new language. And the best way to do it is to speak with them and provide big words and read with them in the mother tongue. If they have, you want them to learn a new language, and the best way is to make sure that that mother tongue
Is fortified.
super solid.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be speak to your child in the language that's strongest for you, right? And then bring in activities that bring in the other language too. But that mother tongue is really essential. That's the best way to make sure that we build on a second language.
The best way you can help us at school is by working on your native language. That's the best way that you know that your child will actually be successful in English here at school.
si uno no está tan seguro en otro idioma, ¿cómo hace uno allí? Si el niño le está hablando en un idioma y uno no quiere dañarlo con mala pronunciación.
Entonces, si ese no es tu lengua materna, entonces no lo uses. Usa tu lengua materna. Nunca traten de usar un lenguaje que ustedes no están seguros.
No, y otra cosa, perdón, la profesora de alemán nos recomendaba es que puedes leer en ese otro idioma porque no vas a afectar el uso del lenguaje, ¿no? O sea, digamos que no le hablemos, es en inglés, no le hables tú en inglés para no afectar la gramática, pero sí les puedes leer en inglés, ¿o no? O sea, like my husband doesn't speak German really well, the teacher would tell her, like just don't speak to your kids in German, but you can read to them in German.
If you feel confident.
Yeah.
Right, if you feel confident
Read to
reading.
them in your own language is great. We have
Right.
awesome
Uh-huh.
literature, and the more vocabulary in your mother tongue, the easier to get vocabulary from a different language.
Yeah, and the reading skill's going to transfer, right? Like if you learn
Right.
to read in Spanish well, you'll learn how to read in English more easily than a child that can't read in their own language. So the skill is going to transfer.
But there, just an advice from my own experience, like my English has a high accent of my Spanish. I'm not from Bolivia. Like if you knew the Spanish accent I have in my mother tongue, you would know. Is that, because I like here I have heard sometimes the Bolivian singing, like the song, the music in English, and that happens. And you shouldn't be embarrassed of that. Careful. Like if you feel that it's because of your accent, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
part of your identity. So that's a great suggestion what the teacher at the German school shared. Like if we're struggling with grammar, let's say, no. But if it's a matter of accent, it's great. Like here, our students, they hear English all day, and so many types of English, different accents, no, from different people and that goes with their, like, they're not gonna catch on the accent of everyone, no? We're eventually, or hopefully we're exposing them to like more standardized American English, right?
And everyone at the end of the day has an accent, right? Even in your native tongue, you have an accent depending on what part of a country, you grew up in. So don't be afraid. I know a lot of people are afraid, like if a teacher has an accent, I don't want that teacher because they have this accent or that accent. Well, everybody has an accent, so like we can't avoid accents. And accents have nothing to do with how well you know a language.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with how you know a language. So that's one thing I want to warn against.
I have a question. When I read with my youngest son, he's 5, English books he doesn't mind. He switches and he brings library books and whatever. But whenever we choose the Spanish book, he always chooses the same 3. And we have tons of books, but he always goes back to the same ones. And lately I've been telling him, otra vez, choose something else. Is it okay? Because we go back to the same 3 ones.
Repetition is not only okay, it's great. It's great, right? Like when they memorize a book, when they have that sense of story. I mean, at some point he'll get tired of it, right? Never. He'll be 15 and he's like, I want this book, mommy.
2 years almost with the same 3-4 books, the same stories.
I'm gonna say, I mean, like try to get books in Spanish that are like, if he likes dinosaurs,
Similar.
that are similar, that he's interested in, right? Try to open up new things for him, but also don't be afraid of repetition. Like, repetition is great, and they understand it more, and they understand it more deeply. And the example I always give, even to our teachers, is like the first time you hear a song on the radio, right? You're kind of like, I don't really care for this song. But by the 10th time you've heard it, you're like, like there's and it's the same thing for them.
Right.
You get into it and you understand the lyrics, and you're like, do you know what he's saying in this part? You know what he's really saying? And it's the same thing for them. Like they
Some
latch
parts
onto parts.
He knows by heart.
It's beautiful.
Word for word. We're still in the same book.
Yeah, it's okay. Don't fear repetition. It's good, right?
Yes.
Voy a hablar en español porque mi inglés es malísimo.
Está bien.
Mi niña juega mucho, o sea, repite mucho lo que hace aquí. Entonces jugamos al colegio todas las tardes. Si no es colegio, es piscina, que es lo que hace, ¿verdad? Pero yo quiero saber si le estoy ayudando o no a mi nieta, porque Gatino a mi nieta, cuando jugamos a la escuelita, o yo soy la profesora o ella es, y me habla en inglés, historias, en su inglés que entendió, está en KD3. Entonces, cuando me toca a mí, digamos, me hace enseñar las vocales, las letras, qué sé yo, y no es lo mismo en español que en inglés. Cuando hablamos en español no hay ningún problema, pero digamos, estoy enseñando las vocales y no es la misma pronunciación. Entonces yo le explico que en español es A y en inglés es A. No sé si lo estoy haciendo bien, ¿eh?
Yo pienso que es mejor nuevamente usar el idioma que usted sabe, porque sí, la A en inglés es A, pero tiene la pronunciación de A en muchas palabras, es el mismo sonido. Entonces ahí puede haber una confusión. Entonces sigue jugando, usted juega a lo español y ella que juega a lo que le gusta, ¿no?
Claro, o sea, hay momentos en que hablamos en inglés, ¿verdad? Hay momentos en que hablamos en inglés y además me sorprende cuando me dice algo que aprendió en el colegio, por decirle, sit down please, yo le contesto, I don't have an space, y me dice, sit down here, y yo, lo pude hacer rato, pero digamos,
Repetition.
cuando estoy...
Es porque escuchan eso 1000 veces al día. Entonces, repetition, ahí sí están aprendiendo. Sit down, please, sit down, please, sit down, please.
Lo pronuncia muy bien, digamos, ¿no?
Oye, gracias por compartir, porque justo es algo tan valioso, sentarse a jugar con su niño. Y bueno, tan chiquitos, por ejemplo, esas edades, they will speak to you in English, they will speak to you in Spanish. Es bueno, okay, no importa, pero if they're having fun, you're investing that
Exactly.
time, estás invirtiendo ese tiempo, ¿no?
Right.
Y es muy positivo, es roleplay.
Sí, yo diría no te preocupes tanto que si no te sale bien el idioma, habla en lo que te salga natural, español, inglés, lo que te salga ese rato con ella, lo que es adecuado. La cosa es que se estén divirtiendo y estén hablando, que no estén viendo tele, que no le estás dando un iPad como babysitter, que no está en el celular, que tenga el contacto humano y que estén hablando y charlando, teniendo una conversación. Eso es lo más importante. ¡Bravo!
No sé si... Ajá, ok.
Estábamos hablando de la lengua que uno habla en casa, ¿no? Porque nosotros hablamos 3 idiomas en casa. Yo soy boliviana, pero manejo más el sueco. Lo que quería decir es que hay muchos niños acá, me he dado cuenta, familias que, como es esta escuela, hablan inglés, los padres están como que tratando de que hablar inglés, ¿no? Y lo hablamos mal, y lo que se pierde es las charlas que uno puede tener con los niños, súper, ¿cómo se llama? Sentimientos,
profundas
charlas. Las charlas mías son en sueco, entonces, y cuando me enojo es español, digamos. Entonces, como que uno encuentra su base, pero para hablar cosas súper más profundas, creo que es el idioma que uno se siente más cómodo en casa, ¿no? Y eso es el mío sueco, por más que soy boliviana. Puedo hablar de sentimientos, de juegos, de comportamientos, todo en sueco, ¿no? El inglés lo hablan con papá y yo entiendo bastante inglés, pero como lo pronuncio mal, entonces dice, no mamá, no, el inglés no contesta. Porque ya saben, ¿no? Los niños, pero es muy importante que creo que los papás sepamos que con qué lengua nos vamos a hablar con nuestros niños después, porque lo que yo veo, vengo de Suecia, y lo que yo he visto en las familias latinoamericanas en otro país, llegan, los niños aprenden sueco, los papás tienen el español, tratan de aprender el sueco, digamos, y lo que veo acá un poquito, ¿no? Entonces, y luego cuando llegan a la edad de adolescentes, no tienen una base tan fuerte con sus hijos y los empiezan a perder, ¿no? Y entonces ahí viene la depresión y tantas cosas otras que pueden llegar. Así que eso es lo que veo igual acá, los papás de esta escuela, que me he relacionado con algunos, que eso es lo más fuerte que uno tiene que tener, que son sentimientos y base fuerte y charlas profundas, las van a empezar a perder si no sacan esto de que no, yo soy de acá español y nosotros seguimos, no acoplarse a la lengua de la escuela, ¿no? Tanto, para eso hay un profesor extra, la escuela, los libros en inglés, pero no
Sí,
sale.
por eso, ¿no? Recalcar,
muy
¿no?
importante.
Su lengua, que ustedes se sientan
Exacto.
cómodos, ¿no? Ese es el lenguaje. Y yo siempre digo, porque hay muchas familias que ellos también, los padres han crecido bilingües o trilingües, ¿no? Entonces, no estoy segura cuál es. Yo siempre digo, ¿en qué idioma, cuando hay una emergencia, en qué idioma gritas a tu hijo? ¡Cuidado! Right? Be careful. Or, ¿qué te sale? Esa es tu lengua que te sientes cómoda. Y en ese lenguaje deberías hablar mucho, mucho con tu hijo, para que más adelante, gracias por tu comentario, cuando esas conversaciones profundas, íntimas, muy importantes, sean naturales para los dos. Bueno, ya es 9:30 en punto y no les queremos mantener más porque sé que tienen días ocupados y las profesoras también. Les agradezco mucho cuando compartimos. Oh, am I speaking in Spanish? When we share the video, the recording and video, that's how old I am, the recording and the PowerPoint, I'll also put each teacher's email so that if you have any other questions, please feel free to email them. Thank you so much for coming. Please have more coffee and cookies.